Hello everyone. Honorable Finance Minister has presented the budget in the Parliament. And in this video, we'll try to understand the budget. And also we'll try to summarize the budget so that if any question is asked on the budget in your examination, then you are able to tackle it, right? For ease of understanding, I've divided this video into 4 parts. So to understand any budget, you should have a good understanding of the prevailing economic situation in the country and in the world. So in the first part, we'll try to do a comparison between the global economy and the Indian economy, and that will set the context for this budget. Then in the next part, we'll look at the various numbers and trends and macroeconomic indicators. In next part, we'll look at the various priorities of this government and the various initiatives that this government has proposed in the budget. And in the last part, we'll look at the various tax reforms that has been proposed by the government. And we'll try to do an overall analysis of this budget. All right, so first part is a comparison of the global economy versus the Indian economy. Now, when we talk about the global economy, although it has been relatively stable in the recent times than what was compared to a year ago, but still it is facing various challenges. There have been wars. There is the Russia-Ukraine war. There is a war going on between Israel and Palestine. There is disruption of the maritime sea routes. So you must have heard the news of Houthi rebels attacking the maritime ships in the Red Sea. Overall, there is high inflation all over the world. And because of this, the major central banks in Europe and US have also increased the interest rates. So because of all these, the world economy is facing a lot of challenges. Now, comparing this with the Indian economy, the Indian economy has been quite robust, right? The current account deficit has improved. India has clocked a economic growth rate of 8.2% in financial year 2024, which is quite impressive. Then the PMI index has been in the expansionary zone for quite some time now. So PMI index is purchasing managers index, and if it is greater than 50, which means that the sectors are growing. So services sectors, manufacturing sectors, both have been above 50 and have been experiencing good growth. If we look at the non-performing assets of commercial banks, then that has been going down, which means that the balance sheets of the banks are also quite in good health. So that shows that the economy is growing. If we talk about the fiscal deficit is the measure of the borrowing needs of the government, right? The fiscal deficit has been also going down, which means government is observing fiscal prudence. The debt levels of the government is also decreasing. And we talk about inflation. The inflation has also gone down. We currently have an inflation of 5.4%, which is within the tolerance level. So generally, we aim for a inflation of 4% plus minus 2%, right? So 5.4% is within that level, and further we are aiming to bring it down to 4%. All right, so to summarize, in one paragraph, we can say that the global economy remains uncertain due to high inflation, wars, political instability, and shipping disruptions. And in contrast, the Indian economic growth remains robust with a growth rate of 8.2% in financial year 24 and inflation of 5.4%, and further targeting a stable inflation of 4%, right? So this can be a good introduction for your answer. Now let's see in the next part the various numbers and trends and the macroeconomic indicators. So this is the structure of the budget. You must have studied this in your textbooks. So the budget is further subdivided into the revenue budget and the capital budget. Now your revenue budget is generally the revenue receipts and expenditures of the government, which are recurring, which happens every year, right? And capital budgets is generally one-time income, one-time receipts, and one-time expenditures. So your revenue receipts will be your tax receipts and non-tax receipts. Your revenue expenditure is your recurring expenditure of the government. So expenditures in defense or expenditure in public administration, salaries of the government employees, all that is revenue expenditure. Then capital receipts is generally the borrowings of the government and the receipts that the government gets by disinvestment, right? Selling of public sector undertakings, like selling off of Air India, all that is capital receipts. And capital expenditure is again expenditure on infrastructure, right? These are one-time expenditures of the government. So this is the structure of the budget. So if we look at the numbers, the current budget amount was 48.2 lakh crore. Okay. If we further subdivide it into revenue budget and capital budget, we see that the revenue receipts, right, is 31.2 lakh crore. Out of this 31.2 lakh crore, the tax revenue receipts is the major portion, which is 25.8 lakh crore. Now, this is the amount that the government would like to increase. The government would want more tax compliance, higher tax collections. So, generally, government focuses on increasing the tax revenue, right? Revenue expenditure is around 37 lakh crore. If we look at the capital budget, the capital receipts is 16.9 lakh crore. Now, the big part of this capital receipts is the borrowing of the government, right? Which is the debt capital receipts. This is the money that the government have to pay back. So that is around 16.1 lakh crore. Now, this is the amount that the government would like to decrease. Okay. Because if the government borrows more and more, then the debt of the government will increase. If the debt increase, then the government will have to pay much more interest payments. That is why the government always wants that these debt capital receipts is decreased. And if you look at the capital expenditure, it was announced that the government would spend 11,11,111 crore in capital expenditure. Now, again, a big focus of the government remains in capital expenditure because this amount goes into creation of infrastructure, and creation of infrastructure leads to multiplier effect, right? The more infrastructure, the more capacity of the economy and more the economic activity. Therefore, the government always wants to increase this amount. All right. If we look at all the revenues of the government, then we have already discussed that a largest chunk of revenue government receives from tax revenues. So if we see, income tax forms 19% of all revenue. Excise duty is 5%. GST is again good chunk, 18%. Corporation tax is 17%. Customs duty is 4%. So this is a big chunk, around 63% of government revenue comes from taxes, and another 27% comes from borrowing, right? And that is why government wants to increase this tax revenue and decrease the borrowing. Now, if we look at the expenditures of the government, then again, a big chunk, 21% goes to states, right? These are the state share of taxes and duties. Then again, the finance commission transfers is 9%, so around 30% goes to the states. Then another big chunk of government expenditure is your central sector schemes, around 16%. Interest payment is 19%. That is why government wants to decrease its debt, because if the debt is increased, then the interest payments also increases, right? For centrally sponsored schemes, there is 8%. Subsidies is 6%. If you observe from the last year's data, then last year it was around 7%. This year it has decreased to 6%, which is good news because the subsidy burden should be decreased, right? Defense is another 8%. All right. If we look at the trends of all the receipts, then we are talking about revenue receipts. Now, we know that tax receipts is also part of revenue receipts. So the government wants to increase revenue receipts, right? And that has been the trend. The revenue receipts has been increasing, which is good news, which means that the government is collecting more taxes. There is greater tax compliance. The tax base is increasing. So the revenue receipts is also increasing. Now we're talking about capital receipts. Now the biggest chunk of capital receipts is borrowings, right? And we see that the capital receipts has been decreasing, which is again good news for the economy because this means that the government is borrowing a lesser amount. Okay. So this is also as per plan, nothing out of ordinary here. If we look at expenditure, then the revenue expenditure is your expenditure in defense, expenditure in public administration, police administration, salaries of employees. So these are, obligatory expenditure of the government. The government has very little wiggle room. Also, as the size of the economy grows, the revenue expenditure will also tend to grow. So this has been growing. Now, a big focus of the government is on effective capital expenditure. So we already talked about capital expenditure. Effective capital expenditure is capital expenditure plus the grants given to states for creation of permanent infrastructure. So that is effective capital expenditure. So again, the trend is towards increasing effective capital expenditure. So this again is good news because this will lead to creation of more and more infrastructure, and more infrastructure will have multiplier effect, and that will increase the economic capacity of the country. Now let's see the trends of the various deficits. So we have four types of deficit: the fiscal deficit, the revenue deficit, effective revenue deficit, and primary deficit. I'm sure you have studied about all these deficits in your textbook. Now, right around this time, which is the COVID period, right? During the COVID period, because the economic activities had gone down a lot, it became the responsibility of the government to give a fiscal stimulus to the economy, and that is why the government borrowed a lot of money so that they could spend a lot of money, and that increased these deficits. But after that, the government has been in a path of fiscal consolidation. So they have been trying to further decrease the fiscal deficit and all the types of deficit. And this year also, we notice that the target for fiscal deficit is 4.9%, which the government has said that they will further bring it down to 4.5% next year. Okay. So this is again good news because this shows that the government is following a path of fiscal prudence. The government has been fiscally responsible and it is not letting the debt of the government to increase. And that is why the deficit trend has been towards decreasing fiscal deficit. We can try to summarize all this data in this manner. We can say that the total budget amount is 48.2 lakh crore. The total tax revenue of 25.8 lakh crore reflects a robust tax collection framework. The capital expenditure accounts for 11.11 lakh crore, the highest allocation to date at 3.4% of GDP, aimed at boosting infrastructure development. The fiscal deficit for 24-25 is targeted at 4.9% of GDP, which is down from the 5.6% in 2023-24. Now, this reduction aligns with the government's objective to bring the fiscal deficit further down to 4.5% by next year. Now, this continued focus on robust tax collection, strategic investment in infrastructure, and fiscal discipline reflects the government's commitment to achieving long-term economic stability and growth. Okay. In the next part, let's see the various priorities of the government and the various initiatives that the government has proposed in the budget. Now, in the budget, as already mentioned by the government in the interim budget, the focus is on these four major social groups. The government likes to call it the four major castes. These are the farmers, the poor, the women, and the youth. Okay. And the theme of this budget has been focus on employment, skilling, MSMEs, which is the micro, small, and medium enterprise, and the middle class. So these are the major focus of the government in this budget. Now, to achieve its objectives, the government has set up 9 priorities, right? What are these 9 priorities of the government? Number 1 is productivity and resilience in agriculture. Number 2, employment and skilling. Number 3, inclusive human resource development and social justice. Fourth is manufacturing and services. Fifth is urban development. Sixth is energy security. Seventh is infrastructure. Eighth is innovation, R&D. And ninth is your next generation reforms. So let's see one by one what are the various initiatives that the government has proposed to cater to all these 9 priorities of the government, right? So the first priority is agriculture. Agriculture mein the government will set up a national cooperation policies, which is for development of the cooperative sector. Then a big focus will be on the agriculture research. The government will try to develop climate resilient varieties of crops and seeds. The government will try to achieve self-sufficiency or Atmanirbharta in oil seeds, which is mustard, groundnut, sesame, soybean, and sunflower. Then the government will also release these new varieties of 109 new varieties of high yielding and climate resilient um, horticulture crops, which will be cultivated by the farmers. Then the government will also try to promote farmer producer organizations, cooperatives, startups to further boost up the vegetable production and supply chain. Okay. Then another big focus of the government is on natural farming. The government has proposed that 1 crore farmers across the country will be initiated into natural farming. They will be provided certification and branding. So branding certification is important because that will uh, give credibility to these farmers, and branding will increase the value of their produce in the markets, right? Then some incentives will be given for shrimp farming, which is an export which will be exported from India. Then a digital public library, digital public infrastructure will be created for agriculture. So digital crop survey will be done. There will be issuance of Jan Samarth based Kisan credit cards. So a lot of initiatives by the government on agriculture. Next priority is employment and skilling. Now, within employment and skilling, there is a PM's package, Prime Minister's package, which is a package of 5 schemes that the government has proposed. So the scheme A is first timers. So whoever gets employment in the formal sector for the first time, they will get 1 month wage from the government up to a amount of 15,000, right? So that is an incentive to join the formal sector. Then scheme B is job creation in manufacturing. So again, it will give incentives to both employee and the employers. So even the employers who is giving the jobs, they will also get some incentives for EPFO contributions, which is your employee provident fund, right? In specified scales for the first 4 years. Then scheme C, the third scheme is a support for employers who are giving jobs. The government will reimburse EPFO contributions for employers up to 3,000 per month for 2 years of all new hires. So again, this is an incentive for the employers. So they will provide more and more jobs to new entrants. Okay. Then there will be schemes for women to facilitate higher participation of women, like setting up of working women hostels. Then there are provisions for loans for students, financial support, a loan of up to 10 lakh for higher education in domestic institutions, which will be given to in form of e-vouchers, right? Direct e-vouchers of 1 lakh students every 1 lakh students every year. And if they pay back in time, they will get an annual interest subvention of 3%. So these are the initiatives. Then the fourth scheme of the Prime Minister's package is the skilling program. Now, within this scheme, 20 lakh youth will be skilled over a 5-year period. So this is a skilling program. And for this, 1,000 industrial training institutes or ITS will be upgraded. The course content and design will be aligned as per the skills required in the industry so that they are easily employable in the private sector, right? Next is the third priority of the government, which is inclusive growth, um, inclusive human resource development, and social justice. So taking along all the social groups, be it women, be it the tribals, or all the backward regions of the country, everyone will experience or partake in the national growth story, right? For this, there will be focus on Purvodaya, which is these eastern states of Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh. The Amritsar Kolkata Industrial Corridor will be developed. There will be schemes for benefiting women and girls. There will be Pradhan Mantri Janjatiya Unnat Gram Yojana for the tribal communities. Now, all these schemes that are proposed in the budget, so government just announces these schemes and the details of the schemes are determined later or revealed later, right? So as the news comes and as these schemes are launched, you would be required to study those schemes so that you can make notes and further answer questions if questions are asked on those schemes. But for analyzing this budget, we'll quickly go through all the various initiatives that the government has announced. Okay. Further, there is provision for establishing Indian post-payment banks in Northeast regions, right? So more banking services for the Northeast regions, which are remote areas and often unbanked areas, right? Then a lot of provisions for the Andhra Pradesh, like promise to complete the Polavaram irrigation project, Visakhapatnam Chennai industrial corridor, Hyderabad Bangalore industrial corridors. So a lot of budget has been allocated to Andhra Pradesh. Then the fourth priority is manufacturing and services. So within manufacturing and services, there is credit guarantee schemes for MSMEs. Mudra for Mudra loans, the limit has been enhanced to 20 lakh. So earlier, within the Mudra loan, there was the Tarun category, which was the highest category, and loan up to 10 lakh was given there. It has been further increased to 20 lakh, right? There is provision for credit support to MSMEs during the stress period. A lot many other initiatives. Then 12 industrial parks will be developed. There will be establishment of rental housing for industrial workers, critical mineral mission for domestic production, recycling, overseas acquisition. This will be done. There will be strengthening of tribunal and appellate tribunals so that all the cases of insolvency is resolved quickly. Then there is the fifth scheme within the PM package. So the PM package has five schemes. The fifth one is internship opportunities. So there will be a scheme for providing internship opportunities in top 500 companies. So whichever are the top 500 companies of India, within that company, around 1 crore youth will be provided internship in the next 5 years. And for this, the allowance that these interns get, which is rupees 5,000 per month, will be given by the government, along with a one-time assistance of 6,000 through by the government, and also will be provided through the CSR funds. Right. So these CSR funds are comes from the private sector, they have to give up 2% of their profits as CSR. Okay. Then the fifth priority is urban development. So for urban development, there the government has said that it will encourage the states to lower the stamp duties. So whenever there is exchange of land, buying and selling of land, a stamp duty is charged. So the center has said that it will encourage the states to lower their stamp duties, especially for properties purchased by women. Okay. Then there is also provision for street markets, development of weekly hearts or street food hubs in cities. Then development of transit oriented development of 14 large cities with population of above 30 lakh. Then provision for water management, development of water supply, sewage treatment, solid waste management. On all these things will be done so that there is urban development. Then the housing needs in urban areas. For this, there will be Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban 2.0, which will cater to the need of 1 crore urban poor and middle class families. Then there will be enabling policies and regulations for efficient and transparent rental housing markets. So even the rental housing market will be regulated so that these landlords or landladies are not able to extract exorbitant rents from the renters or the tenants, right? Then the sixth priority of the government is the energy security. So energy security के लिए भी काफी काम कर रही है government. So there will be initiatives in the nuclear energy sector where the private sectors will be encouraged to enter the nuclear energy sector. There will be setting up of Bharat small reactors. R&D will be done for Bharat small modular reactors, and further newer technologies for nuclear energy will be developed. There will be energy audit so that these MSMEs are, will be given financial support to shift to cleaner forms of energy. There will be a pumped storage policy for electricity storage and facilitation of smooth integration of growing share of renewable energy. Then these AUSC thermal power plants will be set up. This will be a joint venture between NTPC and BHEL, right? Together they will set up full scale 800 megawatt commercial plants. So these are the plans of the government. Then further, another important scheme that the government is going to launch is the PM Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana, where the homes or houses will get to install solar panels in their rooftops, and for that they will be provided free electricity of up to 300 units every month, right? And this will benefit lots of people. Already 1.28 crore registrations have been made, right? So this is important. The seventh priority is infrastructure. Now, we have already talked about infrastructure. There is provision for 11.11 lakh crore, which is around 3.4% of GDP. And this is the highest allocation for infrastructure till date. There will be loans given to states of very large amount, 1.5 lakh crore, long-term interest-free loans. Then there will be phase 4 of Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. So roads will be built in rural areas to provide all-weather connectivity. For mitigation of flood and for irrigation, there will be financial support given to many areas such as the Kosi Mechi interstate link, which is in Bihar. There will be assistance given to states who have experienced flood, states like Assam, Sikkim, Uttarakhand. Further assistance will be given to Himachal Pradesh. A lot of destruction happened in Himachal Pradesh. So there is need for reconstruction and rehabilitation there. So assistance will be given to Himachal Pradesh also. Then the then there is provisions for tourism. So now India obviously has a lot of scope for tourism. So that needs to be developed. So there will be a provisions given for development of Vishnupad Temple Corridor, Mahabodhi Temple Corridors. These are places in Bihar, right? So Bihar has received a lot of budgetary provisions this year. So these will be developed. There will be further development of Rajgir, which holds religious significance for Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains. So this would be a good exercise for you. Find out what are the various religious significance for Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains in Rajgir. Then there will be development of Nalanda as a tourist center. Then a lot of assistance given to Odisha for developing scope of tourism in Odisha. The eighth priority is innovation, research, and development. So for that, operationalization of Anusandhan National Research Fund will be done. Then private sector will be encouraged to engage in research and development. And space economy, we are a booming space economy in India. So space economy will be given a venture capital fund of 1,000 crore. So which is again good news. This will lead to more projects, hopefully by ISRO. And the ninth and the final priority of Indian government is next generation reforms. So next generation reforms, what are the various things that entails in the next generation reforms? Land records in urban areas will be digitized using GIS mapping. There will be digitization of cadastral maps. All the land related maps will be digitized. So there is no lesser amount of um, court cases with respect to all these land conflicts, right? There will be establishment of land registry. Each land will be given a unique land parcel identification number, which also known as Bhu Aadhaar. So even lands will have their own Aadhaar cards now, known as Bhu Aadhaar. And all the surveys and all that will be done. There will be another provision is taxonomy for climate finance. So to enhance the availability of capital for climate adaptation and mitigation, right? So that also requires a lot of capital. So there will be provision for that. Then further FDI and overseas investment, whatever FDI, FPI that is coming to India, that process will be further simplified so that India receives more and more investment. There is another initiative by the government by the name of NPS Vatsalya, right? In which parents and guardians can make contributions for minors, right? So right now for NPS, people make contributions for themselves, right? Now even parents and guardians can make contributions for minors. And once the person reaches the age of 18 years, then that boy or girl will be able to take over and start making his or her own contributions, right? Further, there are provisions for improvement in data governance, new pension scheme that has already been launched but will be further improved. A solution that addresses the relevant issues, protects the common citizen, and maintains fiscal prudence will be formed. So the government has announced a lot of initiatives in these 9 key priorities areas. Obviously, you are not expected to remember all of them, but still you should remember some key announcements made by the government. So I have provided a summary here for all the 9 priority areas. Now I'm not going to repeat it. You can download this presentation from the UPSCprep.com Telegram group. The link will be in the description. So I've summarized for the agriculture, employment, inclusive development, manufacturing sector and services, urban development, energy, infrastructure, innovation and R&D, next generation reforms. So you can take a look. All right, next, let's look at the various tax proposals that the government has proposed in the budget. Now, we have already discussed that government would like to increase its tax revenue. Now, for increasing tax revenue, the government would need to increase tax compliance, increase the tax base, and simplify the tax laws, right? So, government has announced that it will take some steps to simplify taxes. For this, the government will review the Income Tax Act of 1961. So, this review will be done sometime in the next financial year. Then there will be simplification for taxes for charities and how TDS is charged. There will be steps taken to decrease the amount of litigation and appeal that has been pending in various courts. So steps would be taken to decrease that. Then some steps will be taken to deepen the tax base. So how more and more people can be brought within the tax net so that they pay income tax or other kinds of direct and indirect taxes, which will lead to more tax revenue for the government. The government has also announced some specific custom duty proposals. So government has announced to decrease some custom duties for various items, which will further lead to ease of trade, removal of duty inversion, reduction of disputes. So these changes in custom duty, following changes has been proposed. So fully exemption of cancer medicines, reduction of custom duty for mobile phones, gold and silver, shrimp and fish feed, manufacturing of solar cells and panels. So whatever capital goods is required for manufacturing solar cells and panels, custom duty on that will be decreased. Custom duty on critical minerals will also be decreased. So all these will lead to increase in the manufacturing sector of the government. These are the direct tax proposals proposed by the government. So the government has said that the short-term capital gains tax will be 20%. Earlier it was 15%. And long-term capital gains tax will be 12.5%. Earlier it was 10%. So there has been increase in the short-term and long-term capital gains tax. This has been the most discussed and the most controversial decisions by the government, but the government has said that this will lead to rationalization of capital gains. Further, the government has announced that the angel tax will be abolished for all class of investors, and the corporate tax on foreign companies will be reduced from 40% to 35%. So this will lead to more foreign direct investment, more money will come into the economy. Now talking about the new tax regime, new income tax regime, the slabs of income tax has been slightly changed. So the new slabs are 0 to 3% is 0% tax, 3 to 7 lakh is around 5%, is 5%, 7 to 10 lakh income will be taxed at 10%, 10 to 12 will be 15%, 12 to 15 lakh income will be taxed at 20%, and above 15 lakh income will be taxed at 30% income tax, right? So the earlier slabs were 0 to 3 lakh, 3 to 6 lakh, right? That has been made now to 3 to 7 lakh. And then it was 6 to 9 lakh, which has become 7 to 10 lakh. So has been changed slightly. The government has claimed that this will lead to a saving of up to 17,500 rupee per person. Also, the standard deduction for salaried employees has increased from 50,000 to 75,000. So some respite for the salaried employees. Standard deduction, which was earlier 50,000, has been increased by 25,000. Okay. A few other proposals has been made, but these are the major tax proposals by the government. Now, if we want to summarize this, then we can summarize this in following manner. For indirect taxes, custom duties on cancer medicine, mobile phones, gold, silver, solar cells, critical minerals have been reduced. Now, the lower custom duties are also expected to promote the competitiveness of the domestic manufacturing and support Make in India initiative by reducing the cost of raw materials. If we talk about GST reforms, then the government has introduced measures to simplify GST compliance, extending the timeline for availing input tax credit and other procedural relaxations has been given. Now, these reforms aims to enhance GST revenue. Now, we have already seen that the GST revenue was around 18% of our total revenue, right? So the government is trying to further enhance it, reflecting steady growth in the tax base and improved compliance. If we talk about direct taxes, then we can say that the corporate tax rate for foreign companies has been reduced from 40% to 35%, aiming to attract more foreign investment. The angel tax has been abolished, which is a significant step to foster the startup ecosystem. All right. And talking about the capital gains tax and also the security transaction tax. So that is another tax that the government has imposed. So long-term capital gains tax has been increased to 12.5%, and short-term capital gains tax has been increased to 20%. And additionally, the security transaction tax, which is the tax levied when there is a security transaction happening, right? If you invest in futures or options, then a tax is levied there. So STT on futures has been raised to 0.02%. Now, these changes aim to rationalize the tax structure and address the speculative trading activities. So a lot of people who do speculative trading, like trading in futures or options, a majority of the retail investors or retail traders at least incur losses, right? Almost 9 out of 10 people incur losses. So the government wants to decrease the incentive for doing speculative trading, and that is why they have rationalized the tax structure and imposed securities transaction tax, which has been raised to 0.02%. All right. So that was the various tax proposals of the government. Finally, in conclusion, we can say that the overall union budget of 24-25 lays a strong foundation for sustainable and inclusive economic growth by balancing fiscal prudence. So we have already seen that the government is decreasing the fiscal deficit. So there is a balance between fiscal prudence and strategic investment, because the capital investment is increasing to has been increased to 3.54% of GDP, which is 11.11 lakh crores in key sectors, which are the various priority areas of the government, and it aims to propel India towards the vision of Viksit Bharat by 2047. So this is the way you can conclude your answers. And that's it. That was the budget 2024-25 explained to you. I hope you understood it. Have a good day.